Hi, I'm Jackson Petty, and I'm presenting on behalf of myself and Robert Frank on our work Learning Structural Role Alignments Without Linguistic Bias, a Computational Exploration. How do we learn to construct passive structures? With simple transitive constructions drawing an apparent connection between the thematic roles of the active and passive constructions is fairly straightforward, as in one, where the theme from the active construction is fronted to become the subject of the passive construction. Similarly, in prepositional dative constructions, such as to, forming a passive structure requires promoting the theme of the sentence into subject position. In both cases, we see a pattern of generalization where a learner may come to intuit that the thematic theme of an active construction will occupy an object position, whereas in a corresponding passive construction, it will occupy subject position. Yet this pattern of generalization breaks down when we consider double object constructions like those in 3, where it is the thematic recipient of the active construction which shares a positional distribution with the subject of the passive construction. Relative to transitive and prepositional dative constructions, double object constructions are relatively uncommon as linguistic input to language learners, which raises the question, are language learners exposed to enough double object examples to avoid making an incorrect generalization? Or does learning this pattern require any kind of innate language-specific bias? In our work, we look at this question through a computational lens, examining massive pre-trained language models like BERT, and seeing whether or not these well-performing models, which lack any kind of explicit bias for position role mappings, exhibit an understanding of these mappings in active and passive constructions. In our first experiment, we take an off-the-shelf model like BERT and test to see whether we can identify patterns in the probability distributions of predictions it makes for various positions in a language modeling task. Our goal with this experiment is to test whether or not BERT understands that the object of transitive constructions, the direct object of prepositional dative constructions, and the subjects for their passives are the same, in the sense that the same kind of theme words could fit into each position, but that this is distinct from the kinds of words that could be the subjects of passive double object constructions. In order to test this, we examine the probability distribution of BERT's output in a masked language modeling task in 2 ways, looking at both the animacy confidence and the overall entropy of BERT's predictions for a particular position. We test for animacy because we reason that the thematic recipients are more likely to be animate than thematic themes, while we test for entropy on the hypothesis that different thematic roles may be more or less restrictive in the kinds of associated arguments they can have. We filter Penn Treebank sentences for the relevant kinds of constructions, and test BERT on masked versions. Indeed, we do find that in both animacy confidence and entropy, we see distinct distributions between theme and recipient positions while seeing commonality across boys. But it is still possible that the restrictions on possible arguments in each of these syntactic frames, active and passive, prepositional dative and double object, are learned separately, rather than as part of a single abstract set of lexically associated thematic roles that are shared across frames. To test this stricter hypothesis, we introduce 2 novel words into BERT's vocabulary, ricket, a recipient word, and thax, a theme word. We then freeze all of BERT's trainable parameters, accepting the embeddings for these 2 new tokens, and we fine-tune BERT on a very small collection of sentences within a particular voice frame paradigm. For example, we might show BERT how to use thax and ricket only on active prepositional dative sentences. We then test for generalization across voice. That is, does BERT know what to do with these words in a passive prepositional dative construction, across frame, that is, active double object constructions, and across a combination of both voice and frame. We find that BERT is able to generalize across voice robustly, but that it is mostly unable to generalize across construction, suggesting that knowledge of mapping between positions and thematic roles is not shared across construction type. This distinction is perhaps supported by the fact that while voice alternation is a syntactically conditioned process applicable to almost every verb, there are many examples where direct object and prepositional dative constructions are lexically specified, and so robust generalization is perhaps more expected across syntactic alternations than it is across structural ones. Our current and future work on this project involves extending the scope of the inquiry to cover a wider array of syntactic and structural alternations in order to see if this pattern of generalization, or lack thereof, holds in cases of things like erasing constructions and causative and codative alternations.